to be familiar with that. But what I wanted y'all to do is kind of tell my class, kind of give them some tips. We're not professional counselors, but a lot of times we have to counsel clients when we break bad news, or they are just upset about their child having a disability, or they are an adult with a disability. So we just need tips on counseling strategies to use with these clients.
Okay, so the first thing, I'm going to have them talk to you about using the term counseling. Okay, so
Okay.
Students, what would you say about using the term counseling?
Not use it just because y'all aren't in the counseling profession. So we can go over different like communication skills with y'all, like reflections and ways to communicate and things like that to express empathy. But as far as like the word counseling shouldn't be.
That's a supportive. I mean, we can teach you supportive strategies and supportive communication skills, but counseling is a licensed profession, just like speech and language pathology. And so when you start talking about counseling people, you have to be really careful using that term, because you can be working outside the scope of your practice. And so,
which is interesting because our textbook is called Counseling in Speech Language Pathology. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
And it's a terminology problem.
Yeah, it really is. But you know what? You can go to the financial aid department and they're going to tell you that they're financial aid counselors. You can go to the mattress store and they're going to tell you they're the sleep number counselor. So, you know, we get kind of territorial about that term. And part of it is because, I mean, we work hard to earn our title and to earn our license. And, you know, like I told you, these guys have 3,000 hours postgraduate of supervision to be able to be independently practicing. Prior to that, they have, it's a 60-hour degree, and they have 700 hours of supervised practice before graduation. So as far as, that was one of the questions that we had, and Dina, I think you just answered that for me, is like how to work with people when you have to deliver bad news, right? Okay.
Exactly.
Who watches The Good Doctor? Okay, we're not going to do it in the way that Sean does. Okay, that's not helpful to deliver that information. Several of these folks are also teachers, and so they've probably been in situations where they've had to deliver bad news to parents about disabilities. I'm going to tell you, probably the hardest thing that I've ever had to tell a parent was that their child's IQ and their functional assessment score qualified them to be in the range of intellectual disability. And that was back in the day when we still called it mental retardation. And so, you know, to have that conversation with a parent was probably one of the most difficult things that I've ever had to do. So I guess I'm going to ask you some questions first. What kind of feelings do you think a parent is going through when you have to give them that type of information? Grief, absolutely.
Denial,
good.
Would you think anger would be a part of it? Being angry?
yes.
What about guilt? You know,
yes. Like they didn't realize it was there, or they should have done something sooner.
Or what did I do to cause this. I'm gonna tell you this. When my youngest child was born, she weighed 5 pounds 2 ounces, and she was full term. She never made it on the growth chart ever. She was always in the negative percentiles. 34 years old and barely 5 feet tall now. And I spent lots of time going, what did I do wrong when I was pregnant? Why isn't she the same size as my other daughter? Why is she so small? We didn't stop shopping in the toddler department till she was in 2nd grade. And so that's how small she was. But even something as simple as that, I kept questioning, what could I, did I do something wrong when I was pregnant? So, as parents, we can be really irrational about some of the thoughts and ideas that we have about our children being anything that's outside the norm. So, anybody want to offer some tips on what you have to provide?
I think sometimes it's helpful, like if we diagnose a client with like a mental health diagnosis, is like explaining that it's not necessarily their fault or that this doesn't define them. So I think that can be a really important thing to tell to the parents or the client, that just because you have this does not mean that it's you. It's a part of you, but it doesn't define you.
Do you guys work on person first language? Do you know what that means? Okay. So, and I would work with a parent on that as well. For us, it may be a child with autism. And so instead of saying your child's autistic, your child has been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. So, that, and maybe to define what does that mean? But then, are there any strengths that go along with that? The other thing that I have a private practice and I work with folks a lot, and I do my best not to diagnose them. I'm in a little bit different field. And so my belief is that we can describe behaviors and we can work on behaviors without having to give it a label. And if we can remediate those behaviors without labeling it, then that's the way that I like to go. But I like what Amanda has said too about it not being a self-fulfilling prophecy, that this doesn't define your future, that what you do with this depends upon you and how you embrace this. So let me ask you guys this. Because obviously we're not terribly familiar with your field, what's the worst diagnosis you would have to give a parent?
Somebody take a guess or think about what y'all think it would be.
Do you mean like where we're literally diagnosing, or where we're like referring them because we are seeing signs of something?
Or if you're a part of a team, maybe making a diagnosis too could be.
Well, for me, when I worked, usually we had a diag on, as a part of our team. So we never personally diagnosed ID, but she would do some like cognitive testing and things like that. And so when we would come to art, she would always kind of err on the side of precaution and get us all ready to deliver that news to the parent, because she says that that's the hardest thing that she has to tell a parent, is that the child could possibly have ID.
It's ID.
Intellectual disability.
Okay, just intellectual.
And I would agree with that, because there's not a whole lot you can do. I mean, you can teach skills, but there's not a whole lot you can do to remediate that. That they're always going to have some limited functioning related to that. So what would you guys do if you had to tell somebody that how and the parents having an emotional response to it?
I think that goes a lot with what you said. Is just being aware of their feelings and kind of like the position that they're in, and kind of like reflecting those feelings. Okay, I understand that you feel this way, and that's like give them their time to kind of process it. Like it's okay also for them to feel the way they're feeling, and to react a certain way, but then kind of let them have that moment and use kind of build them back up from there, and kind of like say, well, what are some strengths, or what are some things that we're going to do to help with this, and kind of set the positive tone from there on, things that you're going to be able to do to help them, I think.
And I think it's a lot of like, number one I think about is listen, because a lot of people don't know the power of listening. And when you're just there, present, sometimes that's all the support that they need at that point. Because at that point, they don't know what they're feeling, and just listen to them. Listen to them and be empathetic about what's going on, and help them process what the news that they have just received. So I think it's very important for us to listen to them.
So what do you guys think is the difference between being empathetic and sympathetic?
Sympathetic is like wanting to fix the problem for them. Empathetic is more like being there for them and helping them to help their own problem.
How would you guys explain the difference?
I think that empathy is like when you have the ability to experience the feeling of another person, versus like sympathy, like when you care and try to understand them. I don't know if that makes sense.
We feel sorry
Yeah,
for
like you
them.
feel sorry for them whenever you but empathy, you're able to put yourself in that person's shoes and being able to really kind of put into perspective what they're feeling in their position.
Right.
I think the easiest thing to remember the difference between the two is sympathy is about the way you are feeling. Empathy is about the way the other person is feeling. So if I have sympathy for you, I feel bad for you. But if I have empathy for you, I am able to express to you that I am here with you in your feelings. And where I may not have had that same experience myself, I'm projecting to you and communicating to you that I see your feelings, I hear your feelings, I understand this is how you're feeling. That's not saying I've been there, I know that. I've had that same feeling myself. Does that make sense?
And sympathy a lot of times exacerbate, what am I trying to say, makes the situation worse. If you've just delivered bad news, they don't really want your sympathy, I wouldn't think. I think their first response may just be, don't give me your sympathy or pity.
Yeah.
But they would rather you be, like Dr. Solmonson said, in the moment with them there. And sometimes it doesn't, like Josh said, doesn't mean really saying anything, but just listening and being present, like Dr. Solmonson said. That's a huge component of it, is just sitting with them in their pain, and then answering to the best of your ability the questions they may have concerning that news that your expertise will lend itself to give. Which I don't know what that entails. I mean, I don't know what you might say. I don't know how much you would say in dealing with an intellectual disability. Do you tell them every single thing? I don't know. Maybe you could educate us.
Also, too, I think it's important to be comfortable with silence, especially like whenever you're breaking news and stuff like that. And also getting comfortable and used to crying. I mean, that's a big thing in our field. And then, of course, if you're talking to parents or, a client about that, it's going to be an emotional process. So they might cry, they might get angry. So really getting comfortable with those emotions that are all going to be mostly a part of probably their grief.
What do you think is, if I'm upset and I'm crying, what do you think would be a really bad response?
Not to do. Not
To just automatically respond and tell them it's going to be okay.
Exactly. Exactly. Because you know what? In their world, right then and right there, it's not going to be okay. And you know what? When we say to somebody, it's going to be okay, the unintended message of that is, I'm not okay with your emotions, and you need to get them under control because you're upsetting me. And so we have to be really careful if we try to go to, anything that we're trying to be too positive too quickly. That's the message, is I can't handle your emotions, and so you need to tuck that back in real quickly.
I know I always like my feelings to be validated by somebody, for them to like acknowledge, yes, I'm upset, I'm hurt, I'm grieving, and not to tell me it's okay. That's what it's making me think of when y'all are saying all of this.
And that's exactly what empathy is. And even if it's just something as to say, I know this is really hard news to hear right now. That's an empathic response. To say, I can tell you were not expecting this news and you're just kind of trying to work through this right now. So one of the things to think about is, if you got news like that, how would you want somebody to respond to you? And what kind of response would be helpful to you at that point? So when we teach reflective listening, we teach reflection of content. We teach reflection of meaning, and we teach reflection of feelings. So if you're telling me something and I'm giving you a reflection of content, let's demonstrate that, okay? Okay, I'm going to be the client. We do this a lot in class. And I be the client. They solve all my problems in class. So, I'm really stressed right now because I had a whole lot of things that I needed to get done today. And I didn't get things, I kept getting interrupted, and things that were unexpected came up for me. And I'll admit, I took 2 hours off to watch the women's national team play soccer, and they won. They beat Spain, so that was a good part of it today. But my plan today was, it's Monday, I'm going to hit the ground running and get my week organized, and I didn't get my week organized. So don't you reflect content?
You didn't finish the tasks that you set out to do.
Okay.
were y'all able to hear? You could.
Did y'all hear what she said? Okay, anybody else have a reflection of content?
You're disappointed that you didn't accomplish everything you planned to do.
Okay, was that just content? What
It was
made that?
also feeling.
Okay,
Yeah,
That was also
because she
feeling.
put a feeling word in there.
Yeah, I did put a feeling word in.
She put the feeling word in.
Disappointed.
So, anybody else? Come on, interns. You're getting paid to do this now.
Exactly. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Okay, one of the things that we teach people, teach the counselors, is if you reflect content, you get more content.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you reflect, you get more of.
Mm-hmm.
So, what you said, I had a lot of tasks to get done today. I did have a lot of tasks to get done today. And you know what? I'm kind of going to admit I probably should have used my time a little bit more wisely. I slept later than I intended to, but I got home really late. I was traveling. I got home later than I expected. But I always have this thing that if I can get myself organized on Monday's my day to get organized. And if I don't get organized on Monday, it's almost just kind of like the week just kind of falls apart.
You're feeling really overwhelmed right now.
I am feeling kind of overwhelmed right now. What'd she just give me?
A feeling of overwhelmed?
That was an empathic statement. Because did I say I was overwhelmed? I didn't say I was overwhelmed, but she heard my feeling, and so she gave it back to me. I am feeling overwhelmed right now. And I'm a little bit, I just have this pattern of doing this. This isn't something that's new for me. It seems like every Monday I have a plan, and then I just kind of piddle around, and then the week falls apart again.
So you're feeling really frustrated because you keep procrastinating on Mondays.
Exactly. Okay, did she hear me? Okay, did she give me exactly back what I gave her, or did she give me feelings? What was the feeling she gave me?
Frustrated.
Okay, she gave me frustrated. Okay. You know what? I am frustrated, but it's just like, it makes me feel bad about myself because I know what the issue is and I do it over and over.
Do you feel guilty?
I feel guilty. I kind of feel like a loser. A loser with a PhD, but a loser. So I guess that doesn't make me a complete loser.
Tenured loser.
So you see how
Dr. Thomason, how often do you predict their feelings? Or, how often do you do that feeling reflection? And when they're not telling you the exact feeling?
It depends upon what you want. Okay, if I want more feeling, I'm going to reflect feeling. If I want more content, I'm going to reflect content. Okay, now if Amanda had wanted to give meaning to that, if she wanted to reflect meaning, she could have said something along the lines of, it sounds like that this has kind of been a long-term struggle for you of not being on top of things and maybe not being as mindful of your time and using your time as well. So then she might have asked me, has there ever been anything that you've done that's been helpful with that? Has there ever been a time that you were on top of it? So ask me that question.
Has there ever been a time that you were on top of it?
Yes. First of all, the busier I am, the more I tend to manage my time better. But this is the first job that I have ever had that I don't have an imposed schedule, that I don't have to be at work at a certain time. And I don't come home at a certain time. There's no start and stop time. And my schedule is totally up to me to determine. And that's when I really, really started struggling with this. Before that, I don't know that, bar a crisis, I've never been late to work. And even now, I don't miss deadlines. I still meet my deadlines, but I just am not as productive as I could be.
You're really having a hard time adjusting to your new work schedule because there's so much flexibility, and this is overwhelming to you.
And it sounds like you're a structured kind of person. You like having someone dictate your structure.
I need to have somebody to be accountable to. Yeah, this new schedule now has been going on for about 13 years. So. So it's not something that's exactly. And I've tried every system in the world, and it's just staying on myself. If I have to answer to somebody else, I do far better, but I hate answering to somebody
I was
else.
gonna say there's freedom in what you do.
Yeah, I hate answering to somebody else. So so what are you guys seeing going on here?
I noticed in the beginning it was more of like maybe, I don't want to say blaming others for not getting your work done, but it was everybody was in your office, you couldn't do what you wanted to do, and then when they talked it out with you, it ended up being that maybe you just aren't as hard on yourself as you would like to be since you don't have anybody telling you what to do.
Right, then I'm not holding myself accountable to a schedule. That's good. Really good. So for you guys, I would imagine that maybe in working with clients, they'll have some home exercises, some things to do when in between your sessions with them, things that they should be practicing. So that would be a good example of maybe how to talk through, what's preventing you from doing your homework. We call it homework. I don't know if y'all call it homework. Your at home practice exercises, whatever it is that they're supposed to be doing. So that would be a good way to kind of work through that with them. Okay, and then the next place to go with that would be, so I said I'm not as productive as I could be. Where would you guys go with that?
What are some things that would work for you that would
Or some
enable
things in
you
the
to do
past.
that have worked that maybe we could start over and do again?
I think when I plan things out, even a list, if it's in my head, that's when I really, really struggle. But a list for me is it's almost accountability, because I'm looking at that list. I'm kind of competitive too. And so I look at that list and I bet I could beat you to the end of the hall. That's how competitive I am. If I look at that list, it kind of becomes a competition for myself of wonder how quickly I could get those things done. Or, I'm not going to bed with those things still on my list. So making the list is something that's been helpful.
And possibly time limits. You just gave an idea there of putting time limits on that list. That help?
That if I set my own deadlines on it. I also know that I tend to work better under pressure. And I know people say that kind of is an excuse for procrastinating, but I really have tried the thing of working early, and I just am not I have to kind of get to the zone of a certain level of stress that if I start trying to do some of this stuff early, sometimes I just can't get in the headspace to get it done. If it's mundane stuff, I can. But I wrote 3 book chapters in the month of April because they were due April 30th. And I didn't start writing them until April 12th, probably.
Yeah, you work under pressure.
Maybe doing a daily list instead of at the end of the week doing one for yourself each day.
Right.
And then that way.
I guess I don't feel bad now.
What?
I said, I guess I don't feel bad because I'm like that.
So, some of that's accepting, coming to acknowledge who you are as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's kind of some of the easy stuff. Okay, of maybe holding your clients accountable, of helping them to figure out maybe what's preventing them from doing some of the stuff they need to do. Looking at motivation, I think that might be, if you want to read some good stuff, there's some good stuff on motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing has been used a lot with individuals who are have substance abuse problems. But motivational interviewing can be used with anybody who needs to make a change in their life. So, I would imagine that you guys would be in a similar situation, that you have folks that you're doing therapy on and they're not really motivated to make some of the kind of changes. Dina, if you would like, I can send you, we have a video stream that we have a subscription to, and I can send you the login information to the motivational interviewing video.
Yes, that'd be great.
It's about 2 hours long, and the students really like it because it goes through the process of it.
Okay,
And so
that'd be great.
motivational interviewing is used not only by professional counselors, but it can be used by others as well who are helping people trying to make changes in their lives. So I can send you that login as well. How comfortable, let's get back to the original. How comfortable are you guys with dealing with somebody else's emotions, especially if it's somebody you don't know real well, somebody who's older than you, somebody who you maybe can't relate to where they are in life? Are any of you guys parents? Okay, so those of you who are not parents, that might be a little bit more difficult to have to relate to where a parent might be and the feelings that they're having. So how comfortable are you in dealing with other people's emotions?
I'm a very emotional person, and I mean, it doesn't take much. Like, I'll just tear up at that sad PETA video or commercials on TV. So I think I have a really hard time, like, professionally distancing myself from people and their problems, and that's something that I work on. But I have a really hard time distancing myself, especially when it's kids. I just really have a heart for kiddos, and I feel like that's hard to not get emotional with them, with the parents.
I have the same problem. And I mean, there are times that I have clients that cry and I cry with them. Now I don't boohoo, but to tear up with someone is really kind of the ultimate expression of empathy. It's like I so see your feelings enough that it's causing an emotional response in me as well. You have to be careful with that, in that if this is a point that a parent really needs you to be the strong one, and really needs you, that they can't deal with your emotions at the same time. That's important. I know for myself personally, if I'm dealing with my own emotions, and I'm trying to keep it together, I can't deal with anybody else's emotions. I had a group of friends years ago that we used to say we had the "Don't be nice to me" sign on. That, if you're going through something that was really tough and your friends were going to, be supportive and say empathic things to you, and you knew that was just going to put you over the edge and you were going to lose it, then it would be that, "Don't be nice to me. This is not the time to be nice to me because I'm just barely keeping it together." But I'm also going to tell you that one of our goals is appropriately to make our clients cry. I mean, that sounds mean, doesn't it? But if I see that a client is holding back on those emotions, then I'm going to say what needs to be said to let them let go of that, because that's the appropriate place to do that, because we're here to support you through that. And I think that that's the message that you give, is we're here to support you through what you have to do, what you're dealing with. So what would you guys say has been a struggle for you in dealing with other people's emotions?
like for me, I'm like highly attuned to like emotions, and sometimes like I get emotional too, and I guess just kind of like sometimes I gotta like even like in my job right now, I see really hard cases, and I have that knot in my throat. Like I'm just like, okay, I gotta keep it together here. Um, but I think
Josh,
that for me is challenging.
Josh, tell him about the clientele that you work with, because he works with a similar clientele that what some of you may be working with.
I work with people with intellectual disabilities that also have mental health diagnosis, like schizophrenia, bipolar. So it's their symptoms exacerbate, by either or, like either the ID diagnosis and the mental health. So a lot of my clients, especially when I hear like their stories, is a lot of abandonment, a lot of abuse, a lot of just neglect, and it's very heartbreaking. So when I get like a new intake or a pre-placement, when you have to sit in the meeting of the IDT, like the team of everybody that's associated with with that case, it a lot of us are brought to tears because
Mhm.
a lot of the stories are heart wrenching. So learning how to not let those emotions be the only guidance is very difficult sometimes. Um, and I found that I'm getting better at it, thankfully, and but it's still a struggle sometimes.
Josh also works for Community Health Corps, which is a county-based agency. And so many of his clients are going to be clients that don't have other resources. That they come to them because they don't have insurance. They don't have the financial resources to get services any other way.
So how old are those clients? Are they kids? Are they more adults?
My youngest client is 19, and my oldest client is 63.
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay.
Angel, talk a little bit about who you work with.
I work at Burke Mental Health, and I am a continuity of care worker. And so I work with people who are coming out of psychiatric hospitals or crisis centers, and I help kind of get them transitioned into our outpatient services. I do a lot of like crisis intervention services, trying to keep people out of the hospital, out of crisis. A lot of intensive short-term services. I see individuals pretty wide range of ages, from low as like 8 years old all the way up to 70. Just kind of depends. Many different diagnoses, many different walks of lives. That's kind of who I work with.
And there are times that you have to have somebody hospitalized, right?
Yes, there's been a couple times, well, not a couple, more than a couple, quite a few times I've had to do emergency assessments and, recommend a higher level of care. If it gets to the, point where outpatient services are not doing it, we need something immediate due to like imminent risk of harm. If somebody is actively suicidal, actively like psychotic and not aware of their surroundings, not able to make, safe choices for themselves, or if they're, having thoughts of wanting to harm or kill other people, things of that nature.
So talk about how you go through the process of having that discussion with the client about having to go to the hospital.
I feel like a big thing I set up from the beginning when I'm working with people is transparency. Letting them know pretty much from the beginning is that, these are the reasons that might lead up to crisis hospitalization. That way, if that does happen, there's no surprise, understanding that this is something that, is a change, could happen. And these are the ways that it could happen, kind of building that trust and that rapport of, you can talk to me, you can confide in me, but there are limits to it, that I would have to coordinate hospitalization if necessary. So being very transparent from the beginning. And then if it gets to that point, identifying, I try everything I can to prevent hospitalization, I'll try to do safety planning. And if safety planning's not cutting it, if it's not working, then we'll talk about our options, and just kind of I don't sugarcoat it, I don't sugarcoat. I'm clear with them, but I'm very empathetic, and people really do respond to, authenticity, being genuine and being real with them. A lot of times in their lives, maybe they haven't had people that have been real with them. And so, not sugarcoating it and, giving it to them the way they need to hear it. And, while being empathetic is kind of the thing that's worked best for me.
Okay. Do you guys have questions for us?
Have y'all ever had any clients that come to you because they have a child or a family member with a communication disorder and they felt like they needed further, support or counseling or whatever? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Nancy, Nancy's a school counselor. Can you answer that from?
Yeah, and I wanted to add too, so at my campus, we are 3 through 5 grade levels, and we house the adaptive behavior units and the ID, more life skills on our campus. So I'm included in all of those ARDs to deal with those. And, one of the things that I have found that works best for us when we have a student that's going to qualify ID is to have the teacher that's going to be in that classroom in there to really explain to the parent and then take the parent down to the room so that they feel comfortable with the situation. And so I think that works well. We do have several kids that have language deficiencies. They have, and I guess it would be called, they really don't qualify ID, but because they have a communication issue, they do qualify for some extra help. And of course we reach out through our speech, and then we have a great relationship with Burke, and get those services. I always have a list of community services, and make sure that I reach out to those people or get those parents help with what they think they need. I think it's all about relationships. And as far as the school, I mean, once those parents and those kids, it helps the parents a lot.
And I would say I was a school counselor for 13 years. I've worked in hospitals, and I've been in private practice for 26 years. I did a lot of those concurrently, so don't add up those numbers and think I'm that old. I have had parents that we've worked with them to kind of adjust to whatever their child's diagnosis is. I think probably the most difficult one that we ever had, I had a 9th grade student that was on the autism spectrum, and he had not been diagnosed until he was in 7th grade. And it wasn't because the schools didn't see the issue. It took them that long to get the parents to agree to do the assessment. When he was diagnosed, the parents' attitude was basically, okay, you can put whatever label you want on him, but we're going to treat him just like he's normal, and we're not going to do anything. And so he'd been at the middle school where they had really not done a whole lot of skills training to try and help him accommodate for some of his symptoms. So they did things like, in geography class, there was a classroom set of map colors and markers that everybody used. He didn't deal well with that, so they just gave him his own. They didn't make him go to lunch with the other students, that he got to eat his lunch in the library every day. And so when he got to the high school, we were like, these are life skills. I mean, there comes a point you got to go to the cafeteria in life. you know, and you've got to figure this out. So we got them to start working with us, but his parents were pushing him so hard to be a normal kid that they also had him like in Boy Scouts and making him go to the church youth group and stuff like that. So we were pushing him at school to interact more appropriately. They were doing this thing at home. And the kid attempted suicide 3 times. It was the third time before anybody knew. The first time he drank a bottle of cleaning fluid, but his mother was like all green. And so it was all organic stuff that she used to clean their house. So basically he just had really bad diarrhea for a day or so. But his mother didn't know that that's what it was. The second time he filled the bathtub with water, got in it, and threw a radio, an electric radio, into the bathtub. But they had ground fault circuits, and so as soon as it shorted, it tripped the breaker. And so that saved him. I don't really know what happened the third time, but the mom caught him. And so she called the school and told us that he was ill and he would not be back for 4 to 7 days. Well, because I had worked in a psychiatric hospital, I knew exactly where he was. I mean, to go 4 to 7 days, you've been hospitalized. Mm-hmm. And so I thought about it for a while and ended up calling the mom back and just told her, hey, look, I really think that this is what the situation is. And this is what makes me think that. And we talked a lot about how difficult it was for other people to know that, and that we were a team and our job was to support her and to support him at the same time, but that we all had to be on the same page. And if she wasn't willing to be completely transparent with us, then the support that we could provide to her was going to be limited. And so that was the point that she finally owned his diagnosis and said, okay, as a parent, I have to, my kid's trying to kill himself. You know, I got to own this. And so there were she and I had lots of conversations about how difficult this was for her to adjust to this. And that, you know, dealing with her guilt for not intervening early on, you know, so it's tough.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we see that denial a lot with these parents with children with autism, or that, you know, have these autistic characteristics. Right. There's a lot of denial, and, you know, that we want to push for early intervention, but I mean, you can't do anything to get them out of that denial. I mean, what do you do to help with that denial?
I think you just have to keep working with it. I have a better story that I was a 5th grade teacher, and I had a little guy that started in my classroom at the very beginning, and I just really thought that there was some learning disabilities going on there. And I talked with his mom about having him evaluated, and it was finally probably mid-spring that she agrees. She just kept saying, he's just lazy. He's just unmotivated. And so finally I kind of used that with her and said, okay, well, let's do this assessment. And if he's lazy and unmotivated, that's going to show that. And then, you know, we can come at it from a different standpoint. Well, he did have learning disabilities and qualified for special ed, but because it was about 6 weeks before school was out, we made the decision not to start services until the beginning of his 6th grade year. And so he was on another campus. And then I left and became a school counselor, and he was in 5th grade, so this would have been 6 years later. I am a school counselor by that time, and I get this phone call, and this mom calls and says, hey, is this the Mrs. Solmonson that was the teacher, who used to teach 5th grade at Santa Rita? And I said, yes. And she said, this is so-and-so's mom, and I'm calling to tell you thank you. And I was like, okay. And so she told me that he'd been in special ed all through middle school, and that he had been able to really learn strategies to compensate for his learning disability, and that by the time he went into 9th grade, he no longer qualified, and by 10th grade, he was taking AP classes, and that he had just done really, they'd just gotten his report card as a junior, and he had done really well. And she said, I have a younger son who's in 2nd grade, and his teacher just came to me and told me that she thinks that he may have a learning disability. And because of your work with my oldest one, I immediately agreed to having him tested so that we don't repeat the same mistake that we made with the older one. The weird thing was, about 3 weeks later, I was in a restaurant, and we lived in Midland, and this huge kid, walked up to my table and went, at my table where, like, I was drinking a margarita, which is not, what you want one of your former students to walk up to your table and see. And he walked up and he went, "Are you Miss Solmonson?" And I went, "Yes." And he told me his name. He goes, "I just wanted to say hi and tell you that I just got straight A's on my report card." And it's like, that's amazing. So, I think you just, with those who are in denial, you have to just be gentle with that. And if there's a way that you can motivate them to, okay, what if we don't call it this? What if here's these behaviors that we're seeing? And most of the time, parents will agree to the behaviors are problematic. And so here's some strategies that we're going to work on to help deal with these behaviors. So if they're resistant to the diagnosis, treat the behaviors.
I like that. Well, we don't want to keep y'all much longer, but students, if y'all have any other questions, now's your time to ask.
Was this helpful? You can say no, you sucked if you wanted to.
I think it was very helpful, and they have heard some of these terms that y'all have talked about, so I think that was good reinforcement of those terms.
Okay.
Learn a little bit more about them. So.
And I did remember to turn on the recording, Dina.
Thank you so much. And you can just email me that. I appreciate y'all taking the time and talking to us about all this, and it has been very helpful. So.
Okay, very good. Good luck, you guys.
All right. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.